I didn't expect heartbreak to sound so ordinary. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where sunlight dripped through the curtains and the air smelled faintly of coffee and toast. Daniel was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, half listening as I talked about the weekend plans. And then, without warning, he said it. "Emily, could you pass me the sugar?" The name floated in the air like a ghost. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. But then he looked up, realizing what he'd just said, and his face turned pale. My heart stuttered. My fingers froze around the spoon, and in that silence, something inside me shattered. He tried to speak, "Sarah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." But I barely heard him. My mind was racing, filling with all the quiet moments that had led us here. The comparisons, the way he used to glance at old photos when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his touch had grown hesitant, like he was loving someone else through me. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "You called me her name." And in that moment, I realized something even worse. I wasn't just hurt. I was hollow. Because somewhere along the way, I had started becoming Emily too. Hey, before I go on, if you've ever felt unseen in love, if you've ever lost yourself trying to keep someone, this story might speak to you. I'm Sarah, and this is how I found myself again. Make sure to subscribe to Possible Hearts and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because maybe, just maybe, my story could be yours too. After he said her name, Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled away. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a mistake. It was the truth trying to surface. I don't remember how long I just sat there, staring at him. Daniel kept apologizing, his voice trembling with a guilt that sounded almost rehearsed. "Sarah, it was a slip," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I don't even know why I said it." But I knew. I knew because her name had never really left our house. It lived in the corners, between his sentences, behind the pauses when he thought too long before saying mine. He'd never said it aloud before, but now that it had escaped his lips, I could feel her everywhere. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "You called me Emily," I said, again, as if saying it twice would make him hear the gravity of it. "Do you still love her?" His eyes darted away. "Of course not," he said, too quickly. "Sarah, we've been through so much. You know I love you. But love shouldn't feel like competing with a memory." He reached for me again, and this time I let him touch my hand. His skin was warm, familiar, yet all I could think about was how many times that same hand had probably held hers. And I hated that my jealousy wasn't about Emily. It was about me. Because somewhere between trying to be patient, understanding, forgiving, I had lost the sound of my own name, too. The silence between us grew heavy. Daniel looked like a man who'd seen a ghost. I looked like a woman who'd finally realized I'd been living with one. Later that night, I heard him whisper something in his sleep. And when I leaned closer, my blood went cold. "It wasn't my name," he said. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear it, her name, whispered like a confession Daniel didn't know he'd made. The air in our bedroom felt thick, like even the walls were keeping secrets. At dawn, I got up and walked through the house barefoot. It's strange how silence can suddenly feel crowded. Every corner seemed to carry her trace. The framed photo Daniel refused to take down because it's just from an old trip. The playlist he said helped him focus, filled with songs I knew weren't ours. I stopped at his desk where his journal sat half open. I didn't mean to look, but the page was right there. A single line caught my eye. I dreamt of her again. No name. But he didn't need to write it. I already knew. My chest tightened. The kind of ache that doesn't cry, it hums quietly, steady and relentless. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired. Tired of trying to compete with someone who wasn't even in the room anymore. When Daniel woke up, he found me standing by the window, still in the same clothes from the night before. "Sarah," he whispered, as if I might break if he said it too loud. I turned to him slowly. "Do you ever dream of me?" He hesitated. Just a second, but it was enough. That second became an answer. Later that day, I went to the attic to grab a box of old winter coats. Inside, tucked beneath them, I found something that didn't belong to me. A small velvet ribbon, perfumed faintly with vanilla and something floral. It wasn't mine. And when I showed it to him that evening, his face went white.
He didn't speak at first, just stared at the ribbon in my hand like it was something radioactive. His jaw clenched. His chest rose and fell too fast. I could hear the clock ticking behind us, steady, cruel, counting the seconds between lies and truth. "Where did you find that?" he finally asked. "In the attic," I said quietly. "In our house, Daniel." He rubbed his face. "It must have just gotten packed when I moved in." "From her things?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "You kept it." He didn't answer. And that silence, that small, cowardly silence, was the loudest confession I'd ever heard. I looked at the ribbon again. It was faded, soft at the edges, like it had been touched 1,000 times before. It smelled like a perfume I'd never worn. I remembered once asking him what scent he liked most on women, and how he'd said, "vanilla, with a hint of jasmine." I started wearing it after that. Now I realized why. "Sarah, please," he said, stepping closer. "You have to understand, Emily and I were together for years. Sometimes the past just lingers, but it doesn't mean I don't love you." I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You don't love me, Daniel. You love the idea that I could erase her." He reached out, desperate. "That's not true." But I pulled back. Then why have I spent 2 years becoming someone who sounds like her, dresses like her, cooks what she used to cook? His lips parted, but nothing came out. The truth had already filled the room, heavy, undeniable. I placed the ribbon on the table between us. "Keep it," I whispered. "It belongs to the woman you still dream about." And as I turned to leave, I heard him say something that made me stop cold in the doorway. "Sarah, she called me last week." For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in the doorway. "She called you?" My voice barely made it past my lips. Daniel looked like he wanted to take the words back, to shove them into the silence where they belonged. But it was too late. "She just wanted closure," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "She's moving to Seattle, and she wanted to say goodbye."
I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But the way he said closure, soft, nostalgic, it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a door left slightly open. When? I asked. He hesitated. Last week, while you were visiting your sister. That was the weekend he'd sent me a message saying he missed me, that he couldn't sleep without me. I remember feeling touched, loved. Now I realized he probably said those words after hanging up with her. Something in my chest cracked open, not from betrayal, but from recognition. Because this wasn't new. I'd felt it before, in smaller moments. The distracted look when I spoke, the lingering pause when he said my name like he was measuring it against another. I'd been blind, not because I didn't see, but because I didn't want to. Loving him had become an act of forgetting myself. He stepped closer, reaching for my arm. Sarah, please, it didn't mean anything. I pulled away. Maybe not to you, but it meant something to me, because it reminded me of how much I've been disappearing. The words surprised even me. They didn't sound like accusation anymore. They sounded like awakening. And for the first time, Daniel didn't look like the man I loved. He looked like the mirror of every part of me I'd lost. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I began to remember who I was.
The rain started that night. Soft at first, just enough to blur the city lights beyond our window. It was almost poetic in a cruel kind of way. Because for once, the outside world looked exactly like how I felt inside. Daniel sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this," he said quietly. "Tell me what to do." I stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at our reflection in the glass. Two people who looked like strangers rehearsing love. "I can't fix something you don't believe is broken," I said. He looked up, eyes red. "Sarah, I made a mistake. I've made 1,000 mistakes, but you're my wife. I chose you." I turned to him. "Did you? Or did you choose the version of me that reminded you of her?" He shook his head, but I kept going, the words spilling faster than I could stop them. "I changed everything, Daniel. The way I dress, the music I play, even the way I laugh. I wanted to be easy to love, familiar, safe. But I was never me with you. I was a second chance at someone else." He stood up suddenly, his voice cracking. "That's not fair. You think I wanted this? You think I don't hate myself for the way I hurt you?" The thunder rolled outside, sharp and close. I felt something inside me shift. Not anger this time, but clarity. "I don't hate you. I just can't keep being your unfinished story." We stared at each other, the silence stretching until even the rain seemed to hold its breath. And when he finally whispered, "Don't go," I realized he didn't mean stay. He meant don't leave him alone with the ghost he still loved. He followed me into the hallway as I grabbed my coat. The air between us was heavy, not with anger, but the weight of everything we hadn't said soon enough. "Sarah, wait," he said, his voice breaking. "Please, don't leave like this. I'll do better. I'll go to therapy. Whatever it takes." I turned, meeting his eyes. There was so much sincerity there, so much desperation. And for a second, I almost believed him. Not because I thought he could change, but because part of me still wanted to be worth changing for. "Daniel,
I said softly. I think we both know this isn't about trying harder. He looked lost. Then what is it about? It's about me finally realizing that love shouldn't cost my reflection. He took a step closer. I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, the same one he used to wear when we first met. My heart ached from how familiar it felt, how safe it used to be. I love you, he whispered, eyes glistening, even if I failed you. I nodded, and I love what we tried to be. But love isn't supposed to erase you, Daniel. It's supposed to find you. A tear slid down his cheek. If I could go back, you can't, I said, cutting him gently. And neither can I. He reached for me again, but this time I stepped back. Not out of anger, but peace. Because I finally understood some goodbyes aren't cruel. They're just honest. I walked to the door, the sound of rain echoing softly on the porch outside. Behind me, Daniel whispered one last time, "Sarah." I paused, but didn't turn around. For the first time in years, I didn't need to hear what came next.
The house felt different after I left. Quieter, but not empty, just still. I moved into a small apartment downtown, the kind with creaky floors and too much light in the mornings. For the first few weeks, I didn't hang anything on the walls. I wanted to learn what my silence sounded like again. It wasn't loneliness. It was recovery. Some nights, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, half expecting a message from Daniel. But the truth is, even if he had called, I don't think I would have answered. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about me finally learning to exist without needing to be chosen. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before I met him. The first thing I painted was a portrait of a woman with her eyes closed and her hand over her heart. It wasn't Emily. It wasn't even me from before. It was someone new, someone who had survived. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, still in my pajamas, hair messy, eyes tired but alive, and I whispered my name. Sarah. Just that. No hesitation, no echo. Just mine. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything by saying it. It just felt right. And if you've ever forgotten who you are, trying to hold onto love, I hope my story reminds you of this. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop being the person someone else lost and start remembering the person you've always been. I'm Sarah, and this was my story. If it touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Possible Hearts, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because every story, even the broken ones, holds the possibility of finding ourselves again.